Welcome! My name is Elizabeth. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm really glad you're here. I have another true crime story for you today. But I'm going to start with a little disclaimer. So I'd say it's pretty obvious that I am very sensitive and try to be as respectful as possible about people's chosen pronouns and names. There is a person in this story who has questioned their own gender and have used different pronouns in the past, as well as using a different name from the one that the person was born with. Now, in an abundance of caution, I'm going to refer to her with the she, her pronouns that she now uses. I'm also going to use the name, which is her chosen name. And when it is relevant to the story, I'll refer to her given at birth name as just that, her given at birth name. But I'm not going to say it. I'm simply going to use the name that she has chosen and the pronouns that she is now using. So, to try to avoid any confusion and be as respectful as possible, although once we get into the story, you might not want to show this particular person so much respect. Okay, so with that very specific disclaimer, please know that this story involves violence and murder. If you're not in the right headspace for that, please click away, take a nap, watch New Girl. But if you're anything like me, you're going to want to stick around for this wild ride. Okay, so our story is about Ezra McCandless. Now, she was born in 1997 on October 6th in Wisconsin. Her mom, Rosalina, I believe is how you pronounce it, was 14 years old. Her biological father was never a part of her life. So when Ezra was 4, she was adopted by Rosalina's partner, Joshane? I'm really not sure how to pronounce that. Carlin was his last name, or is his last name. When Ezra was 12, the pair would divorce. However, Ezra and her father would remain close. It was during high school that Ezra would question her gender, and for a time would go by he, him pronouns. Her friends actually report that there were times when they weren't sure which pronouns which she was using, because at any given time they could change, which makes perfect sense. The journey of self-discovery is a long and windy road with twists and turns that lead you through whatever experiences you need to determine who you really are. The more you know. But I digress. Okay, back to Ezra. When she was able to, she legally changed her name to Ezra. She felt it was more of an androgynous name, and she felt it defined her more perfectly. She also changed her last name to McCandless, after Christopher McCandless, who is a sort of folk legend. McCandless would, in the 90s, he came from a really privileged background, and he burned all his money, and he took on a new name. There's something Supertramp. I don't remember exactly. I should have looked that up. Anyway, he started this nomadic lifestyle that led him all around the country until he was living in isolation by himself in Alaska. He had found an abandoned bus that he had started living in, and he left behind journals. He was found deceased, but his journals showed that he most likely starved to death. So, there's both a book written on it, and then that book was turned into a movie, and they're both created about his life. So, like I said, he was turned into this sort of folk hero. People used to hike up to the bus and put themselves into actual peril. And so I do believe the Alaskan government moved it somewhere else so that people wouldn't want to go there. But this story is not about Chris McCandless. It's about Ezra McCandless, who simply took his last name as a form of respect towards him and a nod to the kind of lifestyle I think she was hoping to live. Okay, so college turned out to not be the right fit for Ezra. So after she dropped out, she would move to Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Now, Eau Claire is a small artsy town where Ezra could be her individual and artsy self with abandon. A lot of people describe this town as like a little big town kind of thing where, you can access all the things that the world has to offer, but at the same time it's really small and everyone seems to know each other. So she lived an artist life, and she was known for some of her really out there art and photography, and she even used her car as a canvas. So she's just really eclectic and interesting and artsy. So it was the end of the summer of 2017 when Ezra would meet and start a romantic relationship with Jason Mangle. He is a National Guard medic, and he was 33 years old. She was 19, and he was 33. They moved in together in August of 2017. Okay, so Ezra spent a lot of her time in and out of coffee houses in the neighborhood. So one of the ones that she frequented, one day she noticed this guy was very, very focused on his writing, and she sort of bopped her way over to him and interrupted him and asked him, like, hey, what are you writing about? And when he answered cannibalism, instead of being completely turned off, Ezra was interested, and the two started talking. His name was Alex Woodworth, and he was a substitute teacher and a barista at the coffee shop. So Ezra, Jason, and Alex would end up becoming fast friends, all three of them together. So how do I describe? So Ezra, I've mentioned she's a free spirit. So she was, it feels to me like, from, the limited research that I did, that she is the kind of person who just goes wherever his mood... I'm sorry. It feels like Ezra is one of those sort of free-spirited people who just... Okay, is this like the fourth try here? Okay. It seems to me, from the limited amount of research that I've done, that Ezra is a very free spirit, and she's one of those people that just sort of follows their moods wherever they go, wherever the wind directs her. And while she was in a committed relationship with Jason, she was still having sex with other men. And I think that that's just a part of her sort of free spirit, artsy, go wherever, don't make a plan beyond 5 minutes from now kind of personality. Now, she and Alex would begin to have a secret affair, obviously, because the three of them are friends. Jason thinks he's in a committed relationship with Ezra, and Ezra and Alex are now having an affair behind his back. So it would be, I think it was like 4 or 5 months later that Jason would return from his 2 weeks of National Guard duty, that he was away for. And he would get back, and Ezra had moved out of his place and back in with her mother. She told Jason that she was dealing with a trauma, and that a third man by the name of Jay Hansen, J as in just the initial, like that's all we've got, had SA'd her, R-worded her, I'm not sure which, something along those lines. He took her right to the police, but once the police looked through her phone, there were too many holes in her story. Now, the first thing that made them think that this wasn't true was that she had a very flirty conversation with this person over text message, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Consent can be revoked at any moment. It can be just as things are happening. It can be in the middle of things happening, and consent can be revoked. So what does it matter that she was flirty beforehand? Like, that doesn't... So she was flirty beforehand, so now she owes him? Is that what the police are saying? I find that very, very upsetting. But the issue is that there is another piece of information that they get, and that is the fact that she told Jason that she wasn't SA'd. She wasn't R-worded. She had sexual relations with this person and regretted it. So, being abused and having regret are two very, very, very different things. Okay? Very, very different. Agreeing in the moment and regretting later is not the guy's fault. Or whoever. Of course, it can go either way. But it is not... It's the fault of the person who gave consent when they didn't want to. Or didn't think that they would be... they would regret it. Regret is very, very different than not giving consent. But she did tell Jason that she was simply regretful, and so that's why she said what she said, which is so infuriating to me. I don't think that there should ever be a time when a woman cries our word when it hasn't happened. That's one of those things that it just makes me... I'm going to continue with the story now. Okay, so one night, Jason is looking through Ezra's phone for God only knows what reason. I mean, you're in a committed relationship with someone, sometimes you look through their phone. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. Anyway, he finds messages between her and Alex that are clearly sexual. Right, so he's now figured it out. He is shocked by the revelation, and he breaks up with Ezra. At this point, Ezra is now blaming Alex for the end of her relationship with Jason. Jason's the one she wants to be with. She couldn't have just been loyal to him and just... That's, I guess, beside the point. You make your bed, you lay in it. Okay. We have reached the point in the story where the crime occurs. Okay. On March 22nd, 2018, Ezra turned up in Eau Claire. Remember, she'd moved back with her mom, so she wasn't living in Eau Claire anymore. And she found Jason at a coffee shop, and she showed up there. And the two spoke. They can be seen on CCTV footage. Jason says that she seemed agitated and not like herself. Those are his exact words. Not like herself. She left and went to see Alex. Jason would follow on his bicycle. She's in a car, he's in a bicycle. So by the time he got to Alex's, he saw that her car was outside of Alex's place and that Ezra's car was idling. So, it was still on. And the driver's side door was just standing open. So he's waiting out there for her to return. He's sort of pacing back and forth. He's looking. Her door is open and her engine is on. So, I mean, I would assume the same thing. She's going to be coming out any second now. So he's just sort of looking and waiting and waiting and looking. And somebody in the neighborhood is like, that's weird. Why is this dude who seems agitated pacing back and forth in front of somebody's house? That's very strange. So that person, this neighborhood person, dialed 911. So after about 45 minutes of waiting, Jason decides he's not waiting anymore. It's been 45 minutes. Her car's still idling. He's just going to go inside. So he goes inside and he finds the two just simply having a conversation. So he exits the house. And when he comes out of the house, he's greeted by the police who are responding to the 911 call. So from the dash cam footage, you can see the police talking to Alex and you can see the police talking to Jason individually while Ezra remains in her car the entire time. You actually can't really see her. I mean, she's in the car, but it's dash cam footage isn't the highest quality, and then she's inside her car. But finally, the police and Jason would both leave the scene. Okay. It is now 4:15-ish later on that same day. And Ezra is frantically knocking at the house of a dairy farmer by the name of Don Sipple. She asks him if he can take her to the hospital. She's hysterical. She's taken to the hospital. I need to go that, whatever it is. But he brings her into his house, and he calls 911 instead, which was a very, very smart thing to do. If someone asks you to drive them to the hospital, it is probably best if you don't, if you call 911 first. So good on you, Don Sipple, for being so smart. So the 911 call is out there. You can look for it. You can access it. You can hear the whole thing in its entirety. Don Sipple describes Ezra as barefooted, disheveled, confused, hysterical, having blood around her mouth, cuts on her arms, and her clothes were shredded. When Don asks at the instruction of the police what her name is, the first thing she says is, "I don't know." The next name she gives is the name that she was given at birth. And at this point, she's absolutely Ezra McCandless. Now, so she's asking to go to the hospital and claiming that she was assaulted, right? So, and which is how it seems. She's, bloodied and there's cuts and there's like shredded clothes and bare feet and what have you. And so initially she told the police and the paramedics and the hospital staff, all of those different people, that she couldn't remember at all what had happened. And the only name that she could think to give the police to contact was Jason Mengel. Now here's the thing about trauma. It is not strange for someone in the throes of the adrenaline rush of trauma to not be able to think clearly. Many times victims do not make any sense in the first moments following an incident. Sometimes they're hyper-focused. Sometimes they can't, figure out. People react in all different ways, and I am not judging any of the ways that people react to things. So it makes perfect sense that in those first moments, she really couldn't put words to what had happened to her. But those memories return when the adrenaline rush wears off and the person is able to calm themselves. And Ezra's memory issues would last several days, which is not normal. The cuts on Ezra had dried blood on them. The blood was no longer flowing, and that's pretty abnormal. I mean, how far did this girl have to walk, right? When she got away from this guy, like that there's not a single cut flowing with blood on her. So Ezra is treated for what turns out to be just superficial wounds to her arms and her upper thighs. But it's determined that every single one of the cuts to her are self-inflicted. Initially, she would blame Alex for the word boy being carved into her arm. Okay? So on her left arm, it says boy. She says she tells the police that she's questioned her gender in the past and that Alex would call her boy. And it got under her skin, and this was his way of hurting her. But upon further inspection, the police start thinking about this situation. Okay, so Alex is in the driver's... Alex is in the driver's... This is America, right? So the driver's seat's on the left side. So he's in the driver's seat. She's in the passenger seat. Her left arm has boy written on it, but it's facing her. So for him to be able to carve a word as they're in the middle of all of this, there's this altercation happening between them. Somehow he's able to carve boy, but he carves it upside down. And that just seems... The word should be facing away for her, but instead it's right side up for her perspective, which makes, like I said, no sense. Eventually, she would change her story and say that she did it to herself in some sort of fugue state. Okay. So on the very first day when she was found, the police could not locate her car. She told them that this all had occurred in a place called Owen Park, but there was nothing there. And later they would realize that this information was given to them to put them in the wrong place so that they wouldn't actually find the car or Alex. But the investigators decided to return to the dairy farm and follow her footprints. and they led them directly to the car where they found Alex's deceased body. He was half in, half out of the car. From this point forward, Ezra would say she was defending herself, that Alex had tried to overpower her, and that she had somehow gotten a hold of the knife and did what she had to do to survive. And if that were true, then I would say, well done for getting away from him, and that's awesome. But here's the thing. Well, there's actually many things that make that not true. Okay, first, Alex was stabbed 16 times. 16 times. Mostly in his chest and groin. When trying to flee a scene, there's usually a few stabs and then running. Get the hell out of Dodge running. That didn't happen. Second, the very first stab was to his head. The first stab went into his head. That's not a I gotta get away from you stab. That's an I would like to kill you stab. Third, her version of the story was that she grabbed the knife by the blade to get it away from Alex. Now this knife, I'm going to put up on the screen somewhere. And this is a serious knife. This knife is not kidding around. And if she had grabbed it by the blade to try to get it away from him, her hands would have been cut to ribbons. But the cuts on her hands were superficial. There was not much to them. There is no way she grabbed the knife by the blade. Any of you watched Game of Thrones season 1? Catelyn Stark stops the guy from, cutting her throat by putting her hands up. Her hands are nearly cut in half from the situation, and they're bandaged for the rest of the season. Not that I mean to compare our true story to the most fanciful show ever, but it's much more realistic. This particular part. Okay, we're at the fourth thing. The knife, turns out, it was Ezra's. Her father had given it to her. Fifth, when fleeing the scene, she decided to take Alex's phone with her. But she wasn't able to use it because when she fell, it smashed. On a muddy path, it smashed so badly it couldn't be used. I'm not so sure I buy that. But I do believe that the reason she took the phone from him was so that if he was still alive, he couldn't be calling anyone for assistance. And sixth, she said that the encounter between she and Alex happened inside the car. All of it was inside the car. When the police got there, they found that all the blood evidence was outside the car. So the evidence and her story just do not match up. What the authorities determined was that Ezra had spent a great deal of time setting up the scene where Alex was found. The reason the blood on her arms and her face and whatnot were dry, as Don Sipple pointed out, was because the attack had happened hours previous, not minutes. She had taken the time to cut up her own clothes. When examined, it was clear these were not cuts from an attack. To cut up herself, but of course only with superficial wounds, including the word boy carved into her arm that she originally blamed on Alex. It was all a setup. She had staged the entire thing. So, on April 6th, 2018, 2 weeks after Alex's body was found, Ezra McCandless was charged with first-degree intentional homicide. Her trial would begin on October 15th of that year. Now, all of the footage from the trial is available on YouTube, you can find it. It's very easily found. You can watch it, but I don't recommend. I watched it so that I could do this, so I could tell you the story. But it's really boring the way that trials are. That's just how they are. But there is a very interesting piece to the trial, and that's that the defense attorney does something that defense attorneys don't usually do, and that is put the defendant on the stand. She puts her on the stand. Now, this trial is, first of all, Ezra is acting like she is in no way worried. In no way worried that this situation will work out against her. She seems to be enjoying herself. She is clearly so happy to see Jason when he comes in to testify. I think, and I have absolutely no background to make this assessment, but I believe that she has histrionic personality disorder. Now, that's characterized by a pattern of excessive attention-seeking behaviors, often in inappropriate ways, or inappropriate ones, ways of seeking attention. The first weird thing she does is she wears this green sweater that Jason had given her the last night that they saw each other when she was in the hospital, the night of the attack. So the night that she was attacked, he came, she must have said she was cold, whatever. He gave her this green sweater. So when the trial began, a year and a half later, so it had been 18 months since Ezra and Jason had actually seen each other, Jason was asked to point out Ezra in the courtroom by saying where she was and one article of clothing. And he said she's at the defendant's table wearing a pink blazer. She would remove the blazer, and underneath would be the green sweater that he had given her 18 months before. And Jason, when interviewed, would say it really, really unnerved him because, you know, he loved this girl. He thought that she was just a sweet, artistic, fun girl, and it turns out she's actually capable of murder. So he's pretty, I think unnerved is a good word for it. Also, just to see the way that she presents herself, like her hair is perfectly coiffed every day. She's got curly hair, and either it's in like a cute ponytail with her little bangs, or it's like perfectly curled, or it's like she looks like she's ready to perform, right? And when Jason comes in, she almost seems to be like flirting with him, like she's like, it's really uncomfortable. When she's on the stand, first, okay, so a lot of people like to point out the fact that she's got this glee and almost absolute joy at being able to say and spell her name. Now, I don't think that's strange, especially when someone chooses their name to be asked that, to be put on the record, and to be able to say on the record, this is my name. I can understand why she would be happy, glad to be doing something like that. It makes sense to me that she would enjoy using the name that she has picked for herself. Yes, it's true. This is sort of a strange and inappropriate place for her to be enjoying herself. But like I said, she loves the attention. You can just tell. I feel like she wanted to be on the stand because it was her time to shine. It was all about her during those times, and she loved it. She thrived in it. And it didn't seem like there was any way she felt that she could ever be found guilty. It just, the look on her face, the way she presented herself, you know, this is what happened, and this is why, you know, I did what I did, and now you're going to let me out. It was kind of her attitude. It's fascinating, actually. The jury would deliberate for all of 3 hours. And as all lawyers say, when it's really, really short, that could be really, really good and really, really bad, depending on the side you're on and what that means. That just means it wasn't hard for them to come to the decision. Now, you can watch her face as they are delivering the guilty verdict. And it's like this slow realization of truth. And then the light goes out of her eyes. You can tell she is shocked. She can't believe it. this happened on November 1st, 2019. The next time we get to see Ezra would be for her sentencing hearing, which would be February 7th, 2020. Now, her hair would be really, really short. She'd have like a really short hairstyle where like you can almost not see her curls. Like there was a little bit, like it was just long enough to see a little bit of her curls. But so she has a very different look. And she is extremely apologetic about the situation because it's her sentencing hearing. And the judge would hear impact statements from both Ezra's mom and Alex's aunt. So Ezra's mom would would ask for a 20-year sentence with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Or life sentence with 20 years. And Alex's aunt would say whatever is the strictest possible sentence that you can give this person. She can't be trusted to not just, there's someone in her way and she's just going to get rid of him. And then make up these crazy stories and try to make the police believe them. And I mean, so the judge took into account what both impact statements were saying and came back with a 50 years behind bars without the possibility of parole. Ezra will be 72 years old when she first becomes eligible to request parole. Her last appeal was in December of 2023. She was requesting a new trial, and it was denied. What do you think? Let me know below. I can't wait to hear what you guys think. So do me a favor. Be nice to each other out there, and be nice to yourself. You deserve kindness and love. Don't forget that. I'll check you next time. Bye.